A mother Doberman was tied to the train tracks. 4 tiny puppies trembled pressed against her belly. The whistle of a distant train grew louder, shrieking like a blade cutting through the morning air. Time was slipping away. Who could do something this cruel? And was there still time to save them before it was too late? The morning sun in Riverton, Ohio, rose slowly over the old factories, its pale gold light sliding across rusted tin roofs and dew-soaked grass. The air smelled of grease and wildflowers, a strange mix of peace and fatigue, the scent of a town too tired to change. Sparrows chattered in the trees, their calls blending with the low hum of distant trucks and the sigh of wind threading through power lines. It was supposed to be an ordinary morning. I was driving my old Ford along the dirt road by the railway coffee, steaming in the cup holder, the radio softly playing "Bless the Broken Road." I always got to school earlier than the others, a habit that stuck from my years in the service. Do everything early. Check everything twice. But that morning, a different sound made me stop. At first, I thought it was the wind whistling through the poles. A high, thin noise repeating itself. Then it came again, like a faint cry drawn out and fading into the wind. I turned off the radio and rolled down the window. No mistake. It was the cry of a puppy. I slowed down, steering onto the narrow path that led to an abandoned freight yard where the tracks sliced through the fields. The fog was thick enough that the trees blurred after just a few steps. And then, through the thinning mist, I saw it. On the rusted rail lay a mother Doberman tied down with an oil-soaked rope, her body so thin her ribs showed through her damp black and tan coat. Her neck was swollen raw from the cord. Beneath her belly, 4 newborn pups, no bigger than my hand, huddled together, trembling with weak breaths. One wasn't moving. The sight froze me where I stood. I got out, my heart pounding. The air seemed to hum, the whistle echoing from somewhere down the line, still distant but closing in. The rails began to sing a low metallic vibration, like strings brushed by a bow. I dropped to my knees, hands shaking, and tried to untie the rope around her body. It was slick with oil, and blood wound so tight it had cut into her flesh. She pulled back, teeth digging into the rope as if trying to save her own children. I didn't know her name then, but the moment our eyes met, I called her Nova. "Easy girl," I whispered, my voice breaking against the approaching whistle. "I'm here now. Don't be afraid." The puppies whimpered softly, their eyes still sealed, their tiny legs kicking against the wet dirt. The rails vibrated harder. I could hear my own breath and the rising screech of steel. Anyone who's lived near tracks knows that sound. It means you have less than a minute. I gritted my teeth and slipped my hand under the rope. It was hard as wire. My skin tore. Blood mixed with oil. Slippery. I pulled, once, twice. The whistle blared again, long, deafening punching straight through my chest. Nova cried out, twisting her body to shield her pups. "No, don't give up. Do you hear me?" I yelled. The rope snapped. I grabbed the pups, scooped them into my arms, and threw myself sideways, dragging Nova off the tracks. We tumbled into the grass just as the train tore past a gust of hot air, searing my face, the scream of steel filling the air. The ground shook beneath us. Nova whimpered once, then went still. I don't know how long I lay there. When the last echo of the wheels finally faded, I took my first breath heavy, trembling alive. Nova stirred, lifting her head, her deep brown eyes finding mine. And in that dim Riverton morning light, I saw something in her gaze I'd rarely seen in people through all my years of teaching pure, unquestioning trust. My throat tightened as I whispered, "You're safe now, Mama. I won't let anyone hurt your babies again." I don't remember how I drove home. All I know is that my hands were still bleeding, the smell of iron and oil thick in the air inside the old Ford. In the back seat, Nova lay curled up, her head resting near my leg, breathing in short, uneven bursts. The 4 puppies were wrapped in a towel I'd grabbed from the trunk, so tiny that each breath they took sounded like the rustle of paper. When I turned onto the narrow road leading home, the grass was still glazed with dew, and a thin gold light washed over the weathered porch. I opened the door and lifted Nova out. Her body felt so light that it sent a shiver down my spine. A creature that size shouldn't weigh much less than the tool bag I carried to school every day. I spread an old blanket by the fireplace and lay Nova down, then gently placed each puppy beside her. Scout wiggled toward her scent. Bolt crawled up to her belly. Ember tucked himself between her legs, and Ash, the weakest, just curled in on himself, letting out faint, dreamlike whimpers. I wiped the oil from Nova's coat with a warm towel, revealing patches of sleek black and tan beneath. Her neck was swollen and raw, in places the skin broken. I sighed and reached for my phone, dialing a number I knew by heart. Dr. Grace Mitchell speaking. It's me, Evan Walker. I just found a mother Doberman and 4 pups. She was tied to the railroad tracks. There was a brief silence. Then Grace's voice tightened. The tracks, Evan, keep them warm immediately. Use warm water to clean the oil, then wrap them in blankets. I'll come by this afternoon. Thank you, Grace. Keep talking to her. Dogs can hear calm in a human voice. I set the phone down and looked at Nova. Her eyes were half closed, her breathing still shallow. I spoke softly, as if to a soul that had just stepped back from the edge of death. You've done your part. Now it's my turn. By noon, a breeze drifted through the window, carrying the metallic scent of rust from the industrial yard down the road. I washed my hands, dressed the cuts with an old bandage, then sat on the floor, leaning against a chair. The fire popped and cracked. Nova stayed still, her head close to my foot, but now and then she lifted her gaze, no longer wild, just tired and gentle. I looked at them, 4 tiny lives, pink and wrinkled eyes still shut, but chests rising steadily. The sight filled me with something that felt halfway between joy and warning, a reminder that the world could still make something pure, even in the cruelest places. The door creaked open. Ava stepped in, hair tied up, one earbud, still an oversized jacket slipping off one shoulder. "What are you doing, Dad?" I looked up. "Just something." Her eyes dropped to the blanket on the floor. She pulled out one earbud, frowning. "Again, you really can't stop bringing strays home, can you?" My tone deepened. "They're not strays, Ava. They're lives that just crawled back from death." She folded her arms, leaning against the doorframe, lips curving slightly. "So, what now? You're going to keep the whole litter?" I didn't answer. Instead, I poured a little warm milk into a cup lid and set it near Nova's muzzle. She licked it weakly, trembling. "I'm just trying to help them live," I said quietly, using I as if I were talking to myself more than to her. Ava watched for a while. Her expression softened. She crouched a little closer, studying the pups nursing against their mother. One Ash had slipped aside. "This one looks weak." "Because he's the smallest," I said, "but there's still a chance." She stayed silent. I saw her lips tremble slightly before she put the earbud back in and walked away, her steps slower this time. By late afternoon, sunlight poured through the window, brushing over Nova's coat, now dry and gleaming bronze. The 4 puppies slept soundly, curled like tiny notes on the last line of a sad song. I sat there listening to the wind slide through the roof and the steady rhythm of Nova's heart. I used to think home was just the place you came back to after a long day. But that day, I understood something else sometimes. What you bring home is what saves you from being alone. 3 days had passed since the morning I saved them. The skies over Riverton were clearer now. Pale sunlight spilled over the grass behind the house where Nova had begun to stand on her own again, her legs still trembling, but her eyes steadier awake. Scout and Bolt crawled around her, tumbling into the grass every few steps, while Ember nestled quietly against her belly as if clinging to the last warmth of the night. Ash, the weakest, still wheezed softly, but every morning, when I opened the door, he was always the first to stir. Just a small movement, but enough to make me believe he would live. I set a fresh bowl of water beneath the oak tree. The scent of damp soil drifted through the morning breeze. Nova lowered her head to drink, then licked the healing scar along her neck, the rope mark that was finally drying. I sat beside her and reached out to touch her head. She didn't flinch anymore. She just looked at me slow and calm before turning back to her pups. Those eyes, wild yet gentle, made me think of something humans rarely manage: forgiveness. From the porch, Ava stepped out. Her hair was damp, the scent of shampoo still faint in the air. "Feeding them this early, Dad?" "They wake up before dawn," I said, setting down a bowl of food. "Once they start whining, sleep's over anyway." Ava sat near the edge of the grass, eyes following the pups. Bolt tottered over and nipped at her pant leg. She laughed, a short, unguarded sound I hadn't heard in months. "This one's Trouble. Bolt," I said. "That's what I named him." And that little one, she pointed to Ash, the frail pup curled in a patch of sunlight. "Ash. He's the smallest, but stubborn." Ava didn't speak. Her hand moved gently over his back. It was the first time I'd seen her touch another living thing without her guard up. Then came the sound of footsteps on the gravel. "Mr. Walker." I looked up. Mrs. Callahan from across the street stood by the gate holding a basket of muffins and wearing a curious look. "Heard from the kids you brought home more animals." I smiled faintly. Guess the whole neighborhood knows by now. She tilted her head, peering through the fence. When her eyes found Nova, her expression softened. "Oh dear, poor thing." "Tied to the train tracks," I said quietly. "She's better now." Mrs. Callahan set the basket down, hesitating, then lowered her voice. "Evan, I heard something from a few of the neighborhood kids about that dog." I frowned. "What about it?" "They said there were some teenagers playing near the tracks the day before you found her. I can't say for sure, but—" She stopped, avoiding my eyes. "Their names, Jace Miller, Mia Torres, and I think Ava was there too." The air drained out of my lungs. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. I stood there gripping the cup in my hand until my fingers turned white. "You must be mistaken." I managed my voice tight. Mrs. Callahan sighed. "I hope so. I just thought, if it were my child, I'd want to know." She turned and walked away, the faint scent of baked bread trailing behind her. I stood there for a long time, staring after her, not sure how long I'd been frozen. When I finally turned back, Ava was gone inside. Outside, Nova lay stretched in the sun, head tilted slightly, her eyes fixed on me. And for a moment I had the strangest feeling that she knew something I didn't. The noon light spilled across her black and tan coat. Nova let out a soft sigh and rested her muzzle between her paws as the puppies curled into her warmth. I sat on the porch steps, my back against the wall, my mind spinning with questions I couldn't answer. Who could do something so cruel to a creature like her? And what if the face behind it was my own child's? The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint echo of a train whistle. Once a sound that froze me with fear, now just a haunting reminder that truth was on its way. That night, rain fell over Riverton like someone drumming endlessly on the tin roof. The wind slipped through the chimney, carrying with it the smell of wet ash and old wood. I sat in the kitchen, a cup of cold coffee before me. The yellow light pooled across the worn table, patchy and uneven, like time peeling off the faded walls. Outside on the porch, Nova and her 4 pups lay still. Their soft, steady breathing blended with the whisper of the rain, forming a quiet, melancholic rhythm. I kept staring out there, unsure if I was waiting for someone or something. Ava's door opened softly. A brief flash of blue phone light cut through the darkness, then vanished. I heard her footsteps slow, hesitant, before they stopped behind me. Can't sleep, Dad? She asked, her voice small as if afraid to disturb something fragile. I was going to, I said, but my mind won't stay quiet. Ava stayed silent for a moment, then pulled out a chair and sat across from me. The light fell across her face, pale eyes swollen. She'd been crying. I looked at her, and something in my chest tightened. Mrs. Callahan's words from that morning echoed like a needle buried in a wound. Ava was there too. I saw Mrs. Callahan today, I said slowly. She complains about the fence again. Ava forced a thin smile. No, I met her eyes. She said someone saw you near the tracks the morning I found Nova. Ava froze. The rain outside grew louder, as if trying to hide the silence between us. She's wrong, she said quickly, too quickly. I nodded slightly, my voice even. Maybe. But I'd rather hear it from you. Straight. Ava looked down, fingers twisting the rubber bracelet around her wrist. For a long moment I thought she'd walk away. But then she spoke, her voice trembling like a wet thread. We were just messing around. I said nothing. Jay said he wanted to scare some strays near the factory. We brought rope just to spook them, not hurt them. Her voice cracked. But the rope cut into her neck. And then the mother dog barked, tried to dig free, but we got scared and ran. My hands went cold. Every word she spoke pressed like ice against my chest. You didn't go back. She shook her head. We thought someone else would find them, but no one did. I said, softly, eyes drifting toward the porch where Nova lay. No one until I heard her cries. If I'd been 10 minutes later, the train would have hit them. Ava broke down crying. Her sobs blended with the rain, jagged and distorted like bent metal. I didn't know. I didn't think it would go that far. I stood walking toward her, my shoes creaking softly on the old floorboards. For a second, I didn't know what I was going to do, shout, slam the table, or say nothing at all. But when I saw her face, those tear-reddened eyes, I saw myself instead. 3 years ago, when Emily died, I'd run too. From guilt, from pain, from everything. I sat down beside her, placing my hand on her shoulder. Ava. I said, my voice unsteady but firm. Fear doesn't disappear when you run from it. It grows. She looked up at me, lips trembling. Are you mad at me? I turned to the window. Nova had lifted her head. I'm angry, I said, but I don't hate you, because you're still afraid, still sorry, and that means you haven't lost yourself. She cried harder, her head falling against my shoulder. I let her. I didn't speak, didn't try to comfort her. I just let the tears do their work. When her sobs finally faded, I glanced towards the door. Nova had risen from her spot, stepping quietly onto the porch. She stood in the rain, motionless, while her pups huddled together and watched. I walked to the door and called softly, Nova, come inside. She didn't move, only stared at me with those dark, knowing eyes, then took a small step forward. When I crouched down, she pressed her head into my palm, light, warm, trembling. And there, in the sound of the rain, I understood something. Forgiveness doesn't need words. Sometimes it only takes a single touch to remind you that there's still a chance to make things right. The next morning, Riverton woke under a strange kind of calm. The rain had stopped. A pale blue sky stretched thin with mist, and the first sunlight streamed through the window, painting soft gold streaks across the wooden floor. I brewed coffee, the smell mingling with the faint yips of the puppies outside. Nova was already awake, lying watchful by her litter alert now, peaceful in a way she hadn't been before. Ava came down the stairs. She wore a gray hoodie, her hair messy, her face still puffy from last night's crying. I looked at her, but said nothing. You're not going to tell anyone, are you? She asked, voice rough. I'm not telling anyone, I said, but I am doing something else. What do you mean I'm giving you and everyone who was with you a chance to make it right? Her eyes wavered. You mean, you called them I already did? By 10 o'clock, the sound of bike tires crunched outside the gate. Jace, Mia, and Ryan appeared, 3 faces I'd only ever seen passing through the schoolyard. Jace scratched his head, trying to look calm. Mia lingered behind him while Ryan stood silent, hands shoved in his jacket, eyes down. I opened the door, my voice steady. You're here. Come on in. None of them spoke. I led them to the backyard. Nova lay in the sunlight, her pups crawling around her, barking weakly. The sight stopped all 3 in their tracks. Mia covered her mouth. Oh my God, it's really her. Jace dropped his gaze to the ground. Ryan stayed still, his fists tightening. I spoke quietly but clearly. I'm not asking you to apologize. Words don't save lives. But actions can. I pointed toward Nova. Starting today, you'll help me take care of them every day. Feed them clean, their bedding, keep them warm. That's how you'll learn something people tend to forget: kindness. Silence. Jace gave a nervous laugh. You're serious? Completely, I said. If you refuse, I can call the police, but I don't want to. Ava stood beside me, her head bowed, shoulders trembling. Then Ryan spoke first. We'll do it. His voice was hoarse but firm. Jace exhaled, then nodded. Mia wiped her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. By noon, I took them to the small yard and showed them how to clean the dogs, how to check the wounds, and how to replace the blankets. Jace was clumsy. He knocked over the basin. Nova flinched and growled softly, making him step back. Don't be afraid, I told him. Just move gently. She won't hurt you. He knelt again, his hand trembling as he set the bowl upright. Nova watched him for a long moment, then lowered her head and drank. I saw something shift in Jace's eyes, like he was seeing for the first time what his actions had really done. Mia sat beside Nova, brushing her dark coat with an old brush. Her furs so soft, she murmured, I didn't think, after all, that she'd still be this gentle. Forgiveness, I said, is the instinct of those who don't know hatred. The girl bowed her head and fell silent. Ryan chose a corner of the yard and sat down holding Ash, the smallest, weakest pup. The little dog fit neatly into his arms, breathing faintly as smoke. Ryan stroked his back, eyes distant. This one's like a person, he said quietly. Weak, but still trying to live. I looked at him and understood he wasn't just talking about the dog. Ava changed the bedding, replacing it with dry cloths. Her movements were slow, careful. Nova watched, then reached out and gently licked her hand. Ava froze, then burst into tears. I walked over, resting a hand on her shoulder. That's forgiveness, Ava, I said softly. Now it's your turn to earn it. Evening came. The last light of the day spilled gold across the yard. The 4 puppies slept soundly on a clean blanket. Nova lay in the center half asleep, her breathing calm. The 3 teens and Ava sat around her silent, not out of awkwardness, but because they were learning maybe for the first time how to listen to life itself. I stood on the porch watching them. For a fleeting moment, Riverton wasn't the gray town of smoke and steel anymore. It was a place where mistakes were washed clean by gentleness. Nova opened her eyes, looked toward me, then lowered her head between her pups. One long, quiet breath. And I knew the first lesson had begun. 2 weeks have passed since that first morning they arrived. Riverton was slowly warming up the air, carrying both the scent of engine oil from the factory and the sweetness of freshly cut grass after rain. In the backyard, the puppies' barks mingled with the awkward laughter of the kids. To anyone who knew what had happened before, it would have been hard to believe that guilt could bloom into kindness so quickly. Nova had fully recovered. Her coat gleamed, now her eyes bright and alert. The steps that once trembled were steady as she walked across the yard, 4 little shadows trotting close behind. I stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching them. My heart felt lighter, as if I had finally set something heavy down. Jace wasn't sullen anymore. He always showed up first, bringing random scraps he'd found, bottle caps, bits of rope, an old tennis ball. "I'm making toys for them," he'd say, pretending not to care. At first, Nova still watched him warily, but every time he threw the ball, she chased it smooth, fearless. And Jace laughed. A real laugh, free of effort or guilt. I saw in that sound something I'd forgotten from being 15 myself, how innocence could be reborn from one's own mistakes. Mia changed the most. She often sat beside Nova, brushing through her tangled fur. Her hands were careful, as though afraid to hurt her. Once I overheard her whisper, "I'm sorry I didn't stop them. You're better than I ever imagined." Nova lifted her head and licked the back of her hand. Mia cried not loudly, but quietly, tears falling onto the dog's warm black fur. Ryan said little, but Nova seemed to trust him most. He spent most of his time holding Ash, the smallest one. "He's weak," Ryan said, "but he keeps trying. Kind of like me when I was little." "How so?" I asked. "My dad left," he said. "I grew up with my grandparents. Nobody thought I'd turn out okay." I nodded. "And yet here you are taking care of the smallest one. That's something no one can teach Ryan." He didn't reply. He just lowered his head, touching his forehead to Ash's. The puppy sneezed, then pressed its nose gently into his hand. Ava was different. Her change came slower but deeper. At first, she helped out of guilt. But soon it became love. Every morning she woke up early, mixed milk for the pups, and carried them out into the sunlight. She talked to them, told them silly stories from school, and laughed more than I'd heard in years. Once I asked, "Are you still afraid of Nova?" She said, "No, I think. I was more afraid of myself." I looked at her, the same girl who once built walls around her heart, now sitting among a litter of puppies like a young mother. Her hair moved lightly in the breeze, her voice soft, tender. And in that moment I saw Emily, my late wife, in every trace of our daughter's smile. One afternoon, Dr. Grace stopped by. She leaned over the fence, smiling as she watched Nova chase a ball. "My goodness," she said. "She looks like a whole new dog." "I think it's not just her," I replied. "The kids changed too." Grace looked at me with gentle, knowing eyes, maybe because someone showed them that love isn't what you say, it's what you do. I stayed quiet. In the yard, Ava laughed as Jace chased Bolt Mia, sat brushing Nova's coat, and Ryan cradled Ash carefully in his arms. The sight softened my heart, not with sadness, but a quiet kind of peace. Nova ran toward me. Her brown eyes lifted, her breath steady and warm. I knelt, ran my hand along her head. She tilted slightly and licked my wrist, the same spot that still bore a faint scar from the day I freed her. "Thank you, Nova," I whispered. "You reminded me how to teach my child through trust, not fear." She nudged my arm gently, then turned back toward her pups, playing in the sunlight. The 4 little lives tumbled through the grass, their barks scattering into the bright afternoon air. I looked up at the sky, and for the first time in years, Riverton didn't look like a gray industrial town anymore. It looked like a place where goodness could grow again, even from ashes. That morning, the sunlight in Riverton spread thin and soft across the backyard like a veil. The puppies barked lightly. The children's laughter floated through the damp smell of grass after the night rain. Nova lay under the oak tree, head raised, eyes calm like a mother who knows it's time to say goodbye. They were old enough to leave now. Dr. Otter. Grace arrived early, bringing new collars, vaccination papers, and the carefully chosen adoptive families. I looked at them, Scout Bolt, Ember, and Ash. Each one strong now, their coats glossy, their eyes alive. No trace remained of the trembling creatures I'd carried off the tracks that morning. The kids gathered around Nova. Jace knelt beside Bolt, the biggest. The pup licked his face tail, wagging so hard it kicked up dirt. Jace laughed, voice thick. "I'm calling him Rocket," he said. "He's too fast for anything else." I nodded. "Rocket fits. I'll teach him to fetch," Jace added. "But I'll never tie him down, not ever again." He said it slowly, firmly, like a vow. Mia held Ember, the quiet, dark-furred one. She stroked his head, tears streaking her cheeks. "He likes it when I sing," she said. Whenever I brushed him, he'd close his eyes. I smiled. "Maybe because you're gentle. Animals always recognize a peaceful heart." She hugged Ember close and whispered, "Thank you for forgiving us." In the corner, Ryan held Ash, the once frail pup, now stronger but still clingy. He let it lick his hand. "I think I'll keep him a while," Ryan said. "He needs someone who understands him." I smiled. "And you need him too." He nodded. "Yeah, I do." Finally, only Ava and Scout remained. The smallest one, with sleek black fur and bright, curious eyes, sat in the middle of the yard looking up at Ava as if she understood what was coming. "Are you keeping her?" I asked. Ava shook her head softly. "No, I think she belongs somewhere else. But I want to stay with Nova." I smiled. "Nova's staying. This is her home now." Ava bent down and hugged Scout tightly. When the new owner carried her away, Ava turned her face aside, tears falling quietly. Nova walked over, pressing her head gently against the girl's knees. Ava stroked her neck and whispered, "I'm sorry, and thank you." Nova licked her hand once, then lifted her eyes to me, a look both knowing and tender, as if to remind me, forgiveness only matters when it teaches us how to love again. By evening, the yard felt emptier. Nova lay by the porch, her head resting on my leg. Ava sat beside me, sketchbook in hand, drawing the 4 puppies from memory. "You think they'll be okay?" she asked. "I think I said they're starting new lives, just like you." She smiled faintly, her eyes still sad, but clearer. "I think I will too." I looked at Nova, then at my daughter. The late light slanted across the porch, painting all 3 of us in gold. The smell of earth, sunlight, and dog fur mingled in the air, simple, real, alive. Sometimes I whispered almost to myself, God doesn't send us miracles. He sends us an animal to teach us how to be human again. Nova closed her eyes, exhaled deeply, her legs stretching out as if the world was finally safe. Ava leaned her head on my shoulder, and in that quiet moment I knew it wasn't just Nova who'd been saved. We had been too. If you've ever rescued a living soul, a bird, a dog, or something small that needed, you tell me in the comments. Because maybe your story will be the reason someone out there still believes this world has hope. Thank you for listening till the end. If Nova's story touched your heart, please subscribe, share, and help us spread kindness. Because every time we choose compassion, the world is saved just a little more.